Hey everyone, it's Tyler here from OpenPython. So in this lesson, we're going to do two things. First, I'll show you how code actually runs here in OpenPython because it's a little bit different to how you might run Python on your own computer. And then we're going to start using Python as just a very simple calculator, which is honestly one of the easiest ways to see Python doing something useful straight away. So one thing worth knowing is that when you write code inside of OpenPython, it's actually running directly in your browser. To follow along this course, you do not need to install Python, download any software, or configure anything before getting started. So behind the scenes, OpenPython uses a technology called PyDide, which loads a real Python environment directly into your browser. So when you run code here, you're not using some simplified version of Python made for beginners, you're using the same language that professional developers use every day. Later on, if you decide you want to install Python on your own computer, you absolutely can, and that's what you'll need to do for really advanced projects anyways. Python is completely free and available for Windows, Mac, and Linux, but for now I want you just focusing on learning Python rather than worrying about software installation and setup. So the most important thing to understand is how to run your code. Whenever you see a coding exercise, you'll have a run code button available. You either click that button or use the keyboard shortcut shown in the editor, which is Control and Enter. When the code runs successfully, you'll see the output appear underneath the editor. And if something goes wrong, you'll see an error message instead. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's actually write some code. So the first part of this section uses Python as a calculator. Python can perform mathematical calculations just like a regular calculator. In fact, it's often how people experiment when they're first learning the language. So let's look at the first exercise here. We've already got some code waiting for us. It's just, if you have a look, you can see print 10 plus 5. Obviously, we know the answer is going to be 15. But if you press run, you can see it outputs the correct answer. Now we can go ahead and change that. 10 plus 4. Now the output's 14. So if you see yellow, if you see a try again error, that doesn't mean your code is necessarily wrong or failing. It just means that it doesn't match the expected output of our course, because our course allows you to progress based on you solving exercises correctly. So this isn't exactly groundbreaking, but it's just a first example of Python evaluating an expression and then producing a tangible result. Let's move on to the next exercise. This time we've got print 7 times 8. We'll run the code and our output is 56. So one thing I want you to get into the habit of doing is predicting the output before running your code. It's a small habit, but it helps build your understanding so much faster. So now let's talk about the different mathematical operators Python supports. So Python supports addition, which is the plus symbol, as we've seen. So 10 plus 5. Also supports subtraction, so we could do 10 minus 5, ensuring you add a space between the symbols. Multiplication uses an asterisk. And then division just uses a /. So all of these are pretty standard symbols that you would expect, and I would hope that you guys have touched upon before. The ones that catch beginners off guard are floor division and modulo, but before we do that, we'll need to talk about the order of operations. So Python follows the exact same rules you learnt in school. So with our example here, if you have 2 plus 3 times 4, Python will do 3 times 4 before it adds it to the 2, because multiplication happens first. This is the same BODMAS acronym that you would have learnt in school. Moving on to our next exercise. Here we have that same example we just talked about. And if we go ahead and run it, you can see it will do 2 plus 3, giving us 5, multiplying that by 4 first, versus if we remove the brackets, we have 14, right? So when calculations become increasingly more complicated, parentheses are your friend. They make your code much easier to understand and ensure that Python actually evaluates things in the order that you intended. So now let's look at two operators that beginners often haven't seen before. The first is floor division. Floor division uses 2 /. Normally 7 divided by 2 is 3.5. Floor division throws away the decimal portion and it only keeps the whole number, so the result instead becomes 3. The second operator is modulo. So modulo uses the % symbol. Instead of giving us the result of division, it actually gives us the remainder. So 7 divided by 2 leaves 1 left over, so the answer is 1. So let's look at the egg example here. Don't worry about the code too much. We'll go into C variables here later. But say we have 50 eggs. and we want to put them into cartons of 12. The first line tells us how many full cartons we can make. The second line tells us how many eggs are left over. So if we go ahead and run the code here, Python tells us we can make 4 full dozens with 2 eggs remaining. So this is actually a great example of where floor division and modulo become useful in real programs. Finally, let's look at powers. So Python uses 2 asterisks for powers. This means 2 raised to the power of 10. So if we go into our example here, 2 raised to the power of 10, run code, and we have 1024. So you might hear people mention this number when talking about computer storage because it's closely related to how computers represent data. Before moving on, I'd highly encourage you guys just to change some of the numbers in these examples and see what happens yourself. Try your own calculations, break things, and more importantly, experiment. Because the more you interact with the code, the faster you'll learn. But anyways, I'll see you guys in the next lesson.